All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Preds Power Hour here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I am joined by my good friend over there in Nashville, Tennessee, of On the Forecheck, Mr. Bryan Bastin. Bryan, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing today?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's good weather. Got the pup out this morning at the park. She's like all in on just getting as disgusting as possible ahead of the weekend. Dove in everybody water. She doesn't like swimming. She likes just soaking. So she'll just dive in and then just stand there and look around. She loves a good soak. I don't know why the Keeshawns are that way, but that's the way they are, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Aside from the late night with the Predators breaking more records every game, it seems like, and some work stuff. It's been good. Coming off the holiday, it's the first job I've had where the majority of people are working the week after Christmas. So that's been a rude wake up. But other than that, yeah, lots of hockey, and hockey's a little bit more fun right now.
Hockey is fun right now. Whenever we try to quit the Preds, they bring us back in, Bryan. We have to start 64 saves from Saros. It's funny. We talked about on last week's Power Hour where like the man is just you had an analogy. I don't even remember which one you went with in terms of what he is, because I was like the Popeyes worker during the height of the chicken sandwich wars.
The Waffle House waitress.
The Waffle House, yes, where they catch the chair. Yeah. And the man upped it this week with a 64 save outing. What more can we say about Mr. Saros?
I mean, I don't know what there is else to say. I mean, like we said, we he had that history of starting slow, and he started slow, but that was just by his own standards. He got back into form, cleaned up the penalty kill, which has been massive for him. And now you're looking at this. I think he's third in the league in goals saved above expected. I think he's fourth by goals above replacement. I mean, he's making up for lost time very quickly, and nobody's faced more shots than he has. So, I mean, just to give you a quick insight into how like special yesterday was. So, in 60 minutes, just 60, not an overtime game, 64 saves, 110 shot attempts against. So that's out of those 110, 43 of them were either misses or blocks. So I mean, that's still 67 of them got on Jusi Saros, which is ridiculous. But 64 saves is first in franchise history. The previous high was 54 by Dan Ellis, so he broke that one. It's the highest total for the season. It's tied for third all time, which that's incredible to me, because that's going back in the 60s and 50s and stuff too, with 70. So he was very close. And then in regulation time, he was tied for second, which one more would have had him tied for first. And so there's only 3 goalies in the entire history of the NHL who have had more than 59 saves and have won their game, because the top of that list is a lot of people who had lost their game. So I mean, it's really impressive stuff. And I think the biggest thing that surprised me is, in the top 10 right now for most saves in a game, only one other goalie did it in the 2000s, and that was back in 2014. Before that, the next most recent one was in 1991. So all but 5 of the current Predators weren't even born to see any of the other top 10. So they've only seen these 2, I guess. So it's once in a lifetime. I mean, you could see pretty quickly as that game went on that Nashville was trying to hold on for dear life. I mean, it was bad. You think they were outshot 18-7 in the first period, 21-7 in the second period, and then 28-11. But what they did in the first and second, they just had 26 attempts in both periods. They had 53 in the third period. So I mean, And here's the thing that I think really was the key to last night, not just Saros being completely out of his mind and incredible, but Nashville kept Carolina. They had a whole bunch of shots, but the shot quality was roughly average, the same as what Nashville was doing. And so even though they ended up with, I think Hurricanes ended up with 6.5 expected goals, which means, they underperformed that by quite a bit, by 3.5, and Nashville finished with 4.25. So basically, if you look at that and say how many of those attempts, were made and how much, did it average, the percentage, it was about 7.9% for Nashville and about 7.7 for Carolina. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but a lot of the shots that Carolina was taking were from everywhere. I mean, if you look at Nashville, they did a very good job of being close up to the net, pretty much isolating everything there. Carolina shot from everywhere, and I think that might have been the difference.
Yeah, and now there's more concern about Carolina. They've struggled a little bit of late, and we'll see if they're going to be okay going forward. But look, big night for Nashville, doubleheader. As folks are listening to this, they will have already played a back-to-back tonight here. But he's not the only one in terms of Saros having a historic night. We had Philip Forsberg also finding his groove. It turns out good players. Just give them time. They'll figure it out at some point in the season. And we were waiting on guys like Forsberg to break through. But what new records has Forsberg broken of late, Mr. Bastin? And also, how is he finding his groove?
Yeah, so he has not technically didn't break the record, but he joined the 500-point club last week. So he had 3 points in that game actually that he pushed him over to 501 at the time. So only David Legwand and Roman Josi have more. So he's done it quickest too, which is pretty incredible. But you see his name everywhere in Nashville's record books. You see you see Josi's, you're starting to see Saros, overtake some of the Pecorine records. So it's very impressive. He's finally getting back to what we're used to seeing and kind of what we saw last year, because it was a lot to ask of him to try to repeat, I think 16% shooting last year or 18.5%, which is an outlier, but he is actually shooting at 12.9%, which is exactly his career average. So we know in these last 5 or 6 games he's really picked it up. And if you look at what he's done in those games, he's had a really incredible kind of run. He's woken up. They talk about February coming up soon, but yeah. So in the last 5 games, he's got 9 points, including 6 goals in that. So that's pretty impressive. In the 5 games before that, he had 1 goal and 1 point. So he's coming in there and he's doing something, we haven't seen him do all season, and he's stringing it together. He's consistent. I mean, even the game against Montreal, which was a pretty easy game for Nashville, he only had a single assist, but he was all over the ice on that, and he did a tremendous job defensively, which that part of his game is struggling still a little bit, but that's okay. You don't pay Phil Forsberg to play a lot of defense. So, it's been pretty incredible to see him get back up there. He's elevating. I mean, the last game, he played on a line with Juuse Saros and Colton Sissons on the first line. So it works. It's worked for 2 games in a row. So, who are we to judge, I suppose? I didn't think that. I like Parsonen up there. I mean, they're really giving me all the ammunition and making me feel better about, yelling about him all preseason. He's got room to grow, but he's been pretty good. And so it's been nice to watch and see, these line combinations that everybody is real mad about. They've come around and they've actually done pretty well.
Absolutely. And because there's like a curse for whatever reason on this program, we talk up Matthias Ekholm, right, last week, and what he means to this team. And then it's like, well, could he be available for trade? And it's like, okay, well, is that the way the Preds should go? And do you think he's ultimately going to be available? Yeah,
so according Daily Faceoff, I think, did a report, and they had said that, it had been reported earlier this week, that Matthias Ekholm was on the trading block. Now, I don't know if that means that they're actively shopping him or they're saying, hey, this is a guy that's available. I mean, I think this is actually one of those that if they're planning on selling, which they should be sellers at the deadline.
Are we sure? We're 100% certain that they should be sellers.
Yes.
Do you think that's what they'll do, though?
It depends, and I think this is where this is going to make a big difference because, this is a guy that, a lot of times that they had in previous years of the trade deadline, they had guys that were kind of in between your oh gosh, what's his name? Ryan Hartman, players like that, where you didn't think you were going to get that much of a return. Even back like last year when they talked about Ellie Tolvanen, they just weren't getting that much interest. But for Matthias Ekholm is a completely different animal. So he's having a tremendous year, as we've talked about. His cap hit is not bad, 6.25 million, which compared, that's less than Ryan McDonough, that's less than Roman Josi, obviously. I think the only thing that might scare some teams away is the term. He's got 3 more seasons after this one. But, I mean, this guy's 32. He's steadily improved over the last 5-6 years. And he's evolved his game, too, which is really impressive. And so I don't see, if Nashville really has Matthias Ekholm, an alternate captain out there on the trading block, I'm hoping that they walk away with, a first-round pick or, a pick and a couple of players. I mean, they should be able to do pretty well if that's who they move because – he doesn't have the longevity worries or health worries that you might have with Roman Josi with his history of concussions. He's old, but defensemen last forever. So, he's gotten better at moving the puck. I'm not sure, what there is, I think they should hold out and wait until they get something really good or a bidding war started for Matthias Ekholm. And then, of course, there's Dante Fabro, who he's a restricted free agent after this year. He's, in the last year of $2.4 million, which I don't know. I can't say that I don't think he's played up to that, but he's also young and he's getting, he's getting better. In the top 4, he's the youngest by 9 years. So, he's getting there. But, I mean, you look at that, you look at Carrier. Carrier is another guy who's making $730,000. But he's 26, but he's also a restricted free agent. I get the feeling that they're pretty comfortable if it comes to this offseason and both players are still there, that they may not, issue that tender to Dante Fabro just because Carrier has been so fantastic. So
what does your gut say? Do you think both are moved, or do you think one is, or do you think ultimately they don't do anything?
I think in terms of what I would expect to be most likely, I think it would be Dante Fabro for just maybe a depth player, maybe another guy like a prospect. Yeah, well, I think they'd be able to get more than him because he's how young he is. But if they pull the trigger on the Ekholm trade, I think one of two things happens that causes that to happen. One, ownership, Poyle, everybody, they're ready to fully admit that that's it's time to rebuild, it's time to rescrap, because Ekholm's a guy that just gave him a contract not too long ago, wanted to make him a centerpiece. He reminds you of what happened to Ryan Ellis, and so that would be kind of like, yeah, you send Matthias Ekholm out, that's kind of an admission. The other thing is that they trade Matthias Ekholm and they just get some unbelievable deal. They get a lottery pick or something in the first round draft, which I can't imagine anybody's going to forfeit a lottery pick this year with Connor Bedard and what he did in the World Juniors. So it's going to be interesting. If Ekholm moves, I think that means that this franchise is headed in a different direction than what they are right now.
Yeah, but it's also just like Charlie and I have talked for the majority of the season about like the weird part of where Nashville is like, yeah, they're right there in the middle. They're right there at 500. It seems like they're going to be right there on the bubble if they don't make any moves for the majority of this season. Maybe make the playoffs, maybe just miss it. But also, new ownership's coming in. We don't know what their thinking is and what they would prefer to do. But most ownership groups, it seems like baseball's a little bit different. Like, it's hard to get a read on what an ownership group's going to want, but baseball generally like strip it down to the bare bones before we buy, and then we start from scratch. It doesn't seem like that's the plan and what Haslam would want to do when he takes over. And then you wonder, like with Poyle, we've talked about, where I don't think he's going to be looking to just set this team up for the future on his way out. Like, I don't think that's just how a lot of GMs are wired when they're getting ready to leave. They don't want to. It sounds great in theory, like, let me just go ahead and put this team in a good position. I had a great run. Let me move a lot of our good pieces and just let it make the job really put the team, the next guy who follows me, in a good position to build the kind of team that he wants to build. I don't think that's likely. So it's just Ekholm or whoever. I'm like, I just don't see them moving, because I think it's just such a weird front office ownership transition over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be interesting just for the fact that yeah, they'd have to make that move, but I mean, it's still the same ownership group. Haslam will take the majority, but I still think that it's a lot of that. But with Poyle, I mean, even in a situation where he says, I want to set the next guy up, like, it usually isn't going to happen like that, at least not immediately. And you look at San Jose, and they canned everybody, and they got Will Greer in as GM, and he was looking to do a good job, but then things have kind of fallen apart. And a lot of times if you're committing to a rebuild like this, you're going to pull in a GM, and it's going to be a rough year or two, especially if they go, full scorched earth and get rid of some players, get a new coach. I mean, I don't think that Barry Trotz is going to want to, if that's who Nashville wants, if he sees that they're in the middle of a full rebuild, I don't think that's what he's coming out of retirement for. I mean, he could go any number of places in the NHL that'll open up, I'm sure. So it's a very interesting call. I think maybe they've been waiting for a coach, perhaps. I mean, to do something, but I don't know. I think the leash still for John Hines is still long enough to let him keep going, but it's all a matter of, do they want to focus on this season or do they want to focus on the future? And if history tells us anything, they're going to focus on this season.
That would be my guess too. But hey, a lot of wins. You see a lot of good players, and you'll see if this continues, and maybe some other guys pop. And guys like Tolvanen, who have just been in this been on this roster forever, and somebody that the Preds fans are like, hey, we remember him. Remember Tolvanen? He could. Oh wait, is Tolvanen gone? Is he in Seattle? Well, now it's been a couple weeks. Bryan, how has Tolvanen fared, and what is your most recent read on Tolvanen with the Kraken?
Yeah, so it took him a little bit of time to get into their lineup. So his last game with Nashville was on the 19th against Tampa, and he didn't suit up for Seattle until New Year's Day. So he's only been playing. It's just his third game. But if you look at the stats, let me pull this back up. So his time in Nashville, I believe, was 13 games. He had 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points. And in 3 games with Seattle, he has 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. So he is just 1 assist behind what he did in 13 games in Nashville. He's done that already in Seattle. He's 2 power play goals, which, if you look at him, it's vintage, what you would expect for LA Tolvanen. They got him in the circle. He's just blasting them, and that's what he's done. And so, I mean, it's hard to look at this with a small sample size, especially since he was playing only 13 games this year. But Seattle's a different kind of offensive team, and I bet you that they're going to open things up for him. So let's hope he keeps it up. He's a +3, which plus minus is kind of a garbage stat, but he's been, responsible defensively there, like he has this year, like he did in Nashville. So it's going to be very interesting to see. It's encouraging, and I wish him, I hope he balls out. I mean, not just despite, the decision, but just because he deserves it after all this time. So yeah, it wasn't a fun one, but luckily that got overshadowed pretty quickly by Saros' night.
Yeah, and we'll see. We wish him well. It wasn't. We see this all the time in sports, where it's not going to work out in one situation for whatever reason, but a fresh start. And an organization that you're very high on in the Kraken and their front office, and we'll see what ultimately happens with them there. Preds 5-2-3 in their last 10. They got some victories over Edmonton, Chicago, Anaheim, Montreal, and Carolina most recently. I don't know, if they play at that, do you see that kind of pace keeping up? Because it's not terrible, or do you think the schedule tells you that we're going to backslide a little bit over the next month?
Yeah, so I mean they've struggled a bit. So I mean, you look at Chicago, you look at Anaheim, and you look at Montreal. Those are basement dwellers, and Nashville's kind of got a little bit. That's their record against teams that are below them in the standing is much better, obviously, than the ones above them. Obviously they've kind of turned things around a little bit with the win over Edmonton back on the 19th, and then they took Colorado to overtime. They took Vegas to overtime, 2 very good teams, and then Carolina is also a good team.
Beat Carolina, now there's a "We Want Boston" chant. We're just all ready for Boston. Everyone in Nashville is saying, we want the 34-4 Boston Bruins. I don't care. They're 7-0-3. We're ready. It's Boston, Nashville. That's what you're thinking, Bryan.
Oh gosh, that'd be a terrifying matchup. They don't even play Boston until March 28th.
Really?
Yeah, which
Is it in Nashville or Boston?
Oh no, there's it's at Nashville's February 16th. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I'm glad there's only 2 games against them. They're just incredible. But
I mean, the Hurricanes are top of the Metropolitan right now.
yeah, that's true. But we'll see how that shakes out. But I mean, they were the thing about it, if not to put less of an emphasis on what they've done, but they've, if nothing else, they've taken care of the teams they were supposed to take care of. They beat the teams they were supposed to beat. They're game over game, they've gotten much, much better. I mean, if you look, they've got power play goals now, which is just I'm trying to look and see exactly how many now they've got. So they've had power play goals in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he's got 6 out of their last 8 games. They've got a power play goal. So
baby steps when they're second worst in scoring in the West. Baby steps.
Yeah, I mean it's 6 goals. It took them until It took them until mid-November to get 6 power play goals from the start of the season. So, which was a little over a month, but we know that they can do it now. That's the important part, is that they're figuring it out. They're starting to put things together, and it's working. And so we'll see if the offense can keep up now, and Saros doesn't get ground into dust, which I'm starting to worry about again. Maybe they can be a little bit better and punch above their weight class, but we'll have to see.
Where's our Ryan Miller when we need him?
I don't know. I just don't know. That's a good question, though.
If we're going to be able to be the Anaheim Ducks of the prime John Gibson era, we need the Ryan Miller backup option for Saros to conserve his energy.
Compared to, I don't think this is, maybe because,
he was the modern Ryan Miller right now in hockey.
Oh, God, I don't know. Like Corey Perry or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But no, but I will say this. I can tell you're still a little bit new, because wanting to model the Predators about the Ducks.
I'm not saying I want to. I'm saying that's what it feels like, with John Gibson being the guy who you're fighting for your life. The Anaheim offense has just been terrible for so long that we've just become conditioned to it. They're worse in the West again this year, aren't they?
Oh, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, they've scored 90 goals this year. Oh, the Blackhawks are the only one worse. 80 goals for the Blackhawks to this point.
You hate to see it.
Oh, my God.
You absolutely hate to see it.
But, yeah, I don't know. It just seems like that's been the perpetual thing. It's like pulling teeth every year with the Ducks and offense. They're just not allowed to have a good offense, and they just have great goaltending. And the Preds are not that bad, but it does feel like it's just the season has been defined by Saros. And what would this team look like? What's the record if they have just a bottom 5 goalie right now?
So I would say, that's a very good question. I would say that they're not above 500. That's for sure. It's not been very many games where they have just purely outscored guys at other teams. Shoot. It's not pretty.
I think they're one of the worst teams in hockey.
Yeah, you take away about 6 or 7 wins or overtime losses there, just, probably about 10, 12 points. And yeah, I would say that seems about right. Something you definitely don't want.
No. Last thing, road trip tonight. They go to Washington back-to-back. What are we looking at over the course of tonight and over the next week before our next show?
Yeah, so this is one of those prove-it road trips again. So, again, they've got this back-to-back, so they've just played Carolina. Then now they're over in D.C. to play Washington, who now sitting at 4th, just 6 points behind Carolina in the Metro. This is, Ovechkin. TJ Oshie, I think, is actually supposed to be back, I believe. He was injured in the last game against Nashville here in town. So he's back, and they're really good to see that. So, I mean, that's going to be another tough test against Laviolette. Ovechkin still doing his chase, and it seems like he's getting goals whenever he wants now, which, we'll see how that works out. Nashville does a pretty decent job against him, but we'll see how it goes. But then they get a couple days off. They get the weekend off, which is nice. Then they go to Ottawa on Monday, which should be one they can handle. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, another set of back-to-backs. So a second back-to-back in a week at Toronto and then at Montreal. And that road trip is a little brutal. But then they get to come back home for a three games in 4 days against Buffalo, which terrifying, Calgary, and Columbus, which Columbus isn't good, but Columbus put a beating down on Nashville earlier this season. So it's not getting any easier throughout this month. By the time they make it to the end of January and an All-Star break, they're going to need to really take the time and look and see where they're at and evaluate, because these next 10 games or so could tell you exactly what's going to happen at the trade deadline, or at least what should happen.
Yeah. All right, there you go. Bryan Bastin, what can the good folks check out from you over at On the Forecheck and Renegade of Puck this week?
Oh, yeah. So if you haven't seen it, I had a piece out there which came to me very late, and I forgot that I'd been tracking it all year, but I've got a piece over it on the Forecheck talking about the amount of free food the Preds has given away
I saw this,
in
yes.
2022. It's pretty impressive. I was pretty overwhelmed just by the sheer amount of how much they give away and what the value is. So let me pull this one back up for you so I can give you a little bit. But I just thought it was funny. I think people enjoyed it, but it's not like anybody learned anything from it. But yeah, so if you look at it, let's see here. So all told, if you were to redeem every reward that they had earned throughout the calendar year 2022, they would have saved $692 in free stuff and gotten 82,000 free calories. So
there you go.
And then the last thing I want to point out, which I didn't write this anywhere, but I think this is maybe my favorite thing I've ever read, about hockey history, is this guy that is currently sitting at 70 goals, who leads most goals in a game. Let me pull his name back up because I want to make sure I say this correctly, because I have to be very careful. Yes, so with 70, his name is Ron Tugnut. So that's just want to leave you with that for the day. Just remember Ron Tugnut if you get the chance.
Absolutely. There you go. Bryan Bastin, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you next week.
See you next week.